Have you ever looked at your portfolio statement, seen a number, and just wondered, is that good? Did I actually do well? It seems like such a simple question, but the answer can get really complicated really fast. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on portfolio performance. We'll give you the tools you need to understand how your investments are really doing, and we'll be using the NISM framework as our guide.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll tackle the absolute foundation, the relationship between risk and return. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of how you actually calculate returns the right way. After that, we'll see how to measure risk, and then, this is the fun part, we'll combine them into these super powerful ratios. Finally, we'll cover how to benchmark your portfolio and finish up with a look at how the pros break down performance. Let's dive right in. Okay, let's kick things off with what is, without a doubt, the most important rule of the game. It is so easy to just laser focus on that final return number and think, hey, I made 20%. But that's only half the story. And honestly, it's the half that can get you into a whole lot of trouble if you're not careful. I mean, on the surface, of course, a 20% return sounds fantastic, right? But what if I told you that to get that 20%, your portfolio was on a wild roller coaster, and you were just one bad day away from losing half of everything? Or what if the market itself, the index, went up 30% that year? All of a sudden, that 20% doesn't look quite so heroic, does it? Here's the best way to think about it. A return without knowing the risk is like hearing someone's travel time without knowing how they drove. You know, driving at 100 kilometers per hour on a nice, straight, empty highway is one thing. Doing it on a winding, icy mountain road? Totally different story. Understanding the risk is what gives the return its meaning. It's absolutely crucial. So we all agree we need to measure return. But how do we actually do the math? Well, it turns out there's more than one way to slice this, and the method you pick really depends on the question you're trying to answer. The simplest method, the one we all kind of do in our heads, is the holding period return, or HPR. So let's say you invest 100 rupees. A year later, it's worth 110. And hey, you also got 5 rupees in dividends along the way. Your total gain is 15 rupees on that initial 100, so your holding period return is 15%. Super quick, super easy, and it's perfect for a single investment you just bought and held.
But let's be real, life is rarely that simple, is it? What happens when you're not just buying and holding? What if you're adding money every month through an SIP, or maybe you're pulling some money out? As you can see from this table, that simple HPR calculation totally falls apart because your investment base, your starting point, is changing all the time. We need a better tool for this.
And to solve for that, we bring in two powerful methods. First is the time-weighted rate of return, or TWRR. This one is really cool because it strips out the effect of your cash flows when you put money in or took it out. This lets you see how well the fund manager actually performed. On the other hand, you have the money-weighted rate of return, or MWRR. This one tells you how you did, personally, because it's totally influenced by the timing of your investment decisions. This is a massive distinction. One measures the manager's skill, the other measures your actual experience. You know, we also have to be really careful about how we average returns over time. A simple arithmetic average can be super misleading. Just imagine this. You start with 100 rupees. Year 1, you lose 50%, so you're down to 50. Year 2, you have a great year and you gain 100%, which takes you right back to 100. The arithmetic average says you made 25% a year, but you're flat. You made nothing. The geometric mean, on the other hand, correctly shows your true compounded return, 0%. It's way more accurate for investors. All right, we've got a really solid handle on calculating return now. So let's flip that coin over and talk about the other side, risk. How do we actually put a number on the volatility and the uncertainty of an investment? I love this way of thinking about risk. Think of it like the weather. Systematic risk is like a hurricane. It's going to affect everyone in its path, the whole market. And there's not a lot you can do to avoid it. Unsystematic risk, though, that's more like a leaky roof on your own house. It's a problem specific to one company or one industry, and you can absolutely fix it. In investing, that fix is called diversification. So, to put a number on these things, we use two key metrics. First up is standard deviation. This measures the total risk. That's the hurricane and the leaky roof all rolled into one. A bigger number just means a bumpier ride. Then there's beta. Beta measures only the systematic risk, just the hurricane. A beta of, say, 1.2 tells you that an asset is expected to be about 20% more volatile than the market as a whole. Okay, deep breath. This is where it all comes together. This is the moment it all clicks into place. We can now take our measures of risk and return and combine them into these single, elegant numbers, ratios that give us a much, much clearer picture of an investment's true performance. And the most famous of these is the Sharpe Ratio. It answers the one question that really matters. For all the total risk I took, how much extra return did I get paid for it? In this game, you're always looking for the highest number you can find. A higher Sharpe ratio means you're getting more bang for your buck, more return for every unit of volatility you had to endure. Now, meet the Treynor ratio. It looks really similar to the Sharpe, but there's one tiny but super important change. Did you spot it? Instead of standard deviation on the bottom, it uses beta. And what does that mean? It means it's only measuring your return per unit of market risk, that hurricane risk that you can't diversify away. This makes it a really powerful tool for a very specific job. So, the big question is, which one should you use and when? Well, it's actually pretty simple. You use the Sharpe ratio to look at the overall performance of your entire diversified portfolio. But you use the Treynor ratio when you're trying to figure out how a single new stock or fund might fit into your existing portfolio. It's about choosing the right tool for the job. Okay, so you've done the work. You've calculated your risk-adjusted return. You've got your Sharpe ratio. But is it any good? A Sharpe ratio of 0.8 might sound okay, but what if a simple, cheap index fund tracking the same market had a Sharpe ratio of 1.2? Ouch. This is exactly why we need to benchmark. And listen, you can't just pick any old index and call it a day. A good benchmark, a fair benchmark, has to be a proper yardstick. It has to be well-defined, something you could actually invest in, and most importantly, it needs to match your own portfolio style and risk. You know, comparing an aggressive small-cap fund to the Nifty 50 is just comparing apples and oranges. It's not a fair fight. All right, for our last section, we're going to peek behind the curtain a little bit and see how the pros do it. This is called performance attribution, and it's all about dissecting returns to figure out if that amazing performance came from skill or if it was just pure luck. Think of performance attribution as being a detective for your returns. It helps you pinpoint exactly where a manager's success or failure came from. For instance, did they beat the market because they were smart enough to be heavily invested in the IT sector when it was booming? Well, that's a win from asset allocation. Or was it because they picked the one IT stock that shot to the moon while avoiding all the duds? That's a win from security selection. Attribution tells you which one it was. Wow, okay, we have covered a ton of ground today, from basic return math all the way to complex attribution analysis. But if you walk away with just one single idea from all of this, I really hope it's the answer to this one fundamental question. This is it. This is the whole ballgame right here. This single question is the absolute key to being a smart, intelligent investor. It forces you to look past the flashy headline number and actually understand the full story. If you can make a habit of asking this, you will become a more disciplined and ultimately a more successful investor. Always, always start with this question.